What's going on, everybody? It's yours truly, Coach Mike Dub, back with another episode of Sports Talk NFL Insiders, specifically for the Washington Commanders. And yes, after a long season, the NFL season has officially wrapped up. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles, big win over the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Sad that it couldn't be my Commanders, but nonetheless, it was a great season by all teams. It was an exciting Super Bowl, a lot of big plays. Definitely shout out to the NFC East for having a championship back on the East Coast. Like I said, it's unfortunate that it wasn't the Commanders. We're going to get that back from them, but the Eagles definitely earned it. So, that being said, it's officially the offseason, which means that it's time for teams to start listing their priorities, start figuring out what they need to do to move forward, start figuring out whatever it is that they need to figure out in order to get into the big game next year. So, for us, the Washington Commanders, for the first time in a long time, I can say at least, that I feel confident in this team. I think we have the core that we need. You've heard me speak about it before. I think that this is the core team that can go a far distance. Obviously, we went to the NFC Championship this past year. We only were one game away from the Super Bowl. So the question is, what do we need to do in order to get there, in order to get over that hump and get to the big game? For the first time in a long time, like I said, I think that is actually not much. I don't have a long list of priorities. I don't have a long list of things that need to get done. There are some things that have to happen in order for us to have a roster that can compete. But first and foremost, the fact that we have Jaden Daniels, the fact that we have the coaches in the building, and the fact that we're returning our coordinators and a lot of our position coaches, and that structure is going to stay there. So that's the first and most important thing. But I will say there are some pieces that we want to make sure that we keep. First and foremost, I think there's some free agents that we cannot lose. One of them that comes to mind is Jeremy Chin. Now, why do I say that? I say that for a few reasons. Number one, that's a position that we're going to have to, tighten up the secondary. Going to have to make sure that we get some depth in that secondary position. Jeremy Chin, I think, and it's a two-part, reason why I'm saying this. Why he's one of the guys that we don't want to lose. One of the reasons is because that's also a position that I want to, get better at. Is defensive back, is specifically a safety role. I think if we partner him with somebody that can help out in a run fit a little bit, then it'll free him up to be able to play over top, or vice versa. If we want to play him closer in a run fit, a little bit more, helping out with that run game, which you're going to have to tighten up, then we can get another safety on the back end that can help out over top. But either way, I think Jeremy Chin is a good position player and a good piece that we don't really want to lose. I don't think we have too many, big name free agents that we can't afford to lose, like a Jaden or a Terry or anything like that. But Jeremy Chin is one that definitely stands out. Uh, that secondary is something that we're going to have to tighten up, which leads me to offseason priorities as far as free agents or drafting, whatever we need to do to increase that position. Defensive back, safety, specifically. I mentioned before, Jeremy Chin helped out over the top a lot. There's some plays where he played in the box, some games where he helped out in the run fit. We're going to have to find a good 1-2 punch safety back there so that we can figure that out. We had one of the worst run defenses in the league. You saw us in the playoffs. So if we can get ourselves, a good alley player, a good guy that can run the alley and help out in those run fits, and something like that, then I think that'll definitely go a long way. So if we could find an identified safety that can help this out on that back end, or if it comes down to a draft and it's a best player available position and we can tighten up some depth at corner, then I wouldn't be mad at that either. If Lattimore and if Sandstrom can stay healthy, I like our first two starting corners. Like I said, the question is going to be about depth. And when it gets down to the end of the season, are we going to be able to stay healthy? Are we going to be able to get on the field? And when we start playing those teams that like to throw the ball a lot, are we going to be able to match up with them at 3 corners deep or 4 corners deep in the nickel position and things like that? So if we can get some depth in that back end and that secondary to help our guys out, that'll go a long way. I talked about safety. If we identify a guy that can really come in and be that strong 1-2 punch and bring back Jeremy Chin, I think that'll help us out on the defensive side. Second position is going to be an edge rusher. I know we've all heard the rumblings around about Myles Garrett requesting a trade and all those things like that. That's a dream come true if we can make it happen. Obviously, who wouldn't want him? It's a game changer. But even if we don't get Myles Garrett himself, if we can just identify and get a dog at that edge that can get pressure on these quarterbacks to help out on our defense once again, and then also not rush too far upfield so that they can tighten up their run fits and prevent those big runs that we saw in, like against the playoffs, against Saquon, that big run and things like that. Dante Fowler had a pretty good year this year, but there were times where he looked like he might have been out of position with the run game. We've seen that, kind of for the past few years with the Commanders is, undisciplined in the D line, guys that kind of, make big plays, but also give up big plays on that end as well. So if we can find ourselves a good edge rusher that's disciplined, solid in the run, but also can get to that passer, I think that'll be amazing. The third position of need that I identified all season is actually running back. And I know a lot of people say, well, you got Eckler, you got Robinson. They're solid guys. They can hold it down. But we need an explosive scat back, a guy that we can get the ball to and he can make things happen. Somebody that could keep the defense honest against Jaden. That's what we need. Robinson and Eckler, they're solid backs. Eckler's getting a little bit older right now. Obviously, we know how he feels about being a feature back. He don't want to 20 and 25 carries a game. So, obviously, as he gets a little bit older, his role is going to diminish a little bit. He's a good receiving back, and he can help out in the pass game a lot. But when it comes down to that explosive back that can run out the shotgun, run out the pistol, and be able to break those long runs, I don't know if we have that on the roster yet. I haven't seen that from B-Rob. I haven't seen that from Eckler on a consistent basis to make me comfortable in the run game. Run game is just way too inconsistent for me, and I think part of that is because of the style of backs that we have. So if we can get ourselves like a nice little scat back, a guy that runs well off the spread, a guy that's explosive really and really can take that small gap and break a big run and keep that defense honest, that'll go a long way. So hopefully we can identify a guy that can help us out in that run game. B-Rob is going to his last year of his contract. And then also I mentioned Eckler getting a little bit older. He missed some of the season this year, so we're going to have to tighten up that position going forward. And in that same kind of mindset, when we talk about explosive players and playmakers, we need another wide receiver. We got to figure out who's going to step up and be that number two to Terry. Terry had an amazing career year, but it's only going to get harder. The coverage is going to get tighter. Defense is going to start locking in on him a little bit. We saw that in the playoff game as well, where they start to identify Terry and take him away. So we got to identify our number two guy who's going to be able to capitalize off of that, going to be able to take advantage of mismatches, and just step up and be a playmaker. As teams start to get more film on Jaden and teams start to tighten up, and clearly he's not going to sneak up on anybody. We got to be sure to give him weapons, vertical weapons and weapons underneath where we can do a quick screen and do a few things. We saw Dayami Brown step up towards the end of the year. I was happy to see that. Hopefully he could be consistent, but my mindset is that we're going to have to go out and find ourselves a good number two. We've heard names like T. Higgins. We've heard, some other names get floated around. But whatever we do, we got to identify somebody just also to keep up that depth. Not saying that Dayami can't hold it down, but got to keep up the depth on the playmaker side of the ball. And finally, last but not least, the position I think we have to address is actually linebacker. I mentioned it before. The run defense was really bad this past year. And obviously it starts with the guys up front getting healthy. We got some invested in our defensive tackles. We got three guys that we're looking to step up big, and Allen, Payne, and Newton. And they're three guys that are capable. But then on the back end, we got to get better with our run fits. The type of defense that we have, I mentioned the safety position. Hopefully we can get a safety that can play downhill, run those alleys, and we can spill to them, and we can kind of help out on that end. But also if we can identify some linebackers. Frankie Louisville had an amazing year. Bobby Wagner, we know what he brings to the team. But we're going to have to, they're not going to be there forever. Not only we're going to have to increase the depth, we're going to have to get a guy that we can count on in the future that can help us out in that run game and be that third linebacker that we can get to kind of shore up that defense going forward. So if you hadn't noticed, there's the central theme that the big majority of the moves that we need to make are on the defensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn, he's a defensive coach, so I think that he's going to address that. Offensively, there's not too many holes that I see for what we're running. But if we can tighten up on that defense, and I think we can really make a run for it. And I will say that this is a team that's closer than we thought we would be. We're just a few moves away from making it happen. But we can hit these numbers, then I think you'll definitely see the Commanders back in the playoffs again next year.